Amy, let me tell you about a magical place that is so exactly designed to be enclosed space, year-round fun for the whole family that I bet you already know what I'm going to say before I even say the name. Let's say it together on three. 1, 2, 3. Great Wolf Lodge. You got it, Amy.
My kids loved Great Wolf Lodge when we went. You probably already know that it has a huge indoor water park with a wave pool, lazy river, a bunch of massive water slides. But then your pack can hit the other attractions because wait, there's more.
Great Wolf Lodge has adventure-packed attractions like Magi Quest, a live-action game kids can play throughout the lodge, plus the Northern Lights Arcade. Spent some quality time there, so your kid who loves the lazy river and your kid who loves fantasy games will both have a great time.
Great Wolf Lodge also offers great dining options and complimentary daily events like nightly dance parties, all under one roof. Unpack the car once and you're settled in to have fun. And with 22 lodges across the country, you're always a short drive away from adventure.
We've both had such great times at Great Wolf Lodge, so bring your pack together at a lodge near you. Learn more at greatwolf.com and strengthen the pack. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret.
And this is Amy. Today we're talking to Danielle Silverstein. Danielle and her husband Adam co-host the podcast Marriage and Martinis. They're also the co-authors of the book The Date Night Questions Experience. Adam and Danielle are the proud parents of 3 kids and 2 rescue dogs. Welcome, Danielle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit of your story that brought you to becoming a person who talks about marriage.
Yeah, we've had the podcast a little over 3 years now. Around 4 years ago, we were in a really, really dark place in our marriage, in our life, financially. It was just, people talk about rock bottom. Our rock bottom was a pretty long period of time. And we were going through a lot. My father-in-law was sick and has since passed away. He was dealing with terminal cancer, and my husband was just, kind of manifesting his trauma in certain ways that were probably not healthy, well, definitely not healthy. And, we just didn't know what was going to happen with our marriage, but we would still sit once or twice a week together in our living room area, what we like to call our adult lounge area, and have a cocktail and really just end up either hysterically laughing or hysterically crying. We just always have this connection that no matter what we're going through, it doesn't go away. And I one night just said to Adam, we should be podcasting this, because I had looked for a podcast or a resource that was basically something that wasn't telling me how I was supposed to handle everything, that wasn't giving me religious help or 7 steps. I just wanted someone who was going to be like, I am there too. And we couldn't find it. So when I said that to him, I thought he was going to laugh at me, and he didn't. He said, I think that might be a good idea. And here we are.
I think it's interesting because I think a lot of people who are providing marriage advice are coming from a place of like, we're doing it perfectly and therefore we're experts on this. And what I really like about what you guys do is that you come from a place of like, hey, we're kind of struggling with this and we're going to help you figure it out as you watch us figure it out. But it's a vulnerable place to come from. So was that hard for you?
Looking back, I think to myself, I don't know how the first time we spoke into the mic, we did it. Number one, I don't know how we didn't have more like, who do we think we are to be doing this?
Right.
And also, we live in a small suburban town. Our kids are in the schools here, and we knew that people were going to hear everything we were going through. Our family was going to hear stuff that we had never revealed to anybody. But it actually wound up being something that was, for the most part, completely liberating.
Why was it liberating?
Well, to tell your own story and be in charge of your own story is something that a lot of people don't get. People speculate and they tell their own version, or, it becomes a game of whisper down the lane where, it's just a lot of gossip that turns into something else. And I think people knew we were going through something. But when we were able to tell it ourselves, it's like you can't really spin that. it's told. We've put it out into the universe. We've been completely honest. You couldn't make it much worse than what we said ourselves. So, anytime I was with somebody and they were with me and wanted to be with me, it was them knowing exactly who I was and what I was going through.
It's interesting because it takes out the layer we often talk about on this show that mothers, women put an extra layer for ourselves. We have the feeling or the struggle, and then we feel bad about having the feeling or the struggle because we feel like we must be the only one. So now we have two things to worry about. We have the struggle of our relationship and the shame of the struggle of our relationship. What if somebody finds out I must be the only person that I know who's going through something like this? And you're sharing it. I mean, obviously you're saying it's liberating for yourself. It's definitely liberating for your listeners, I would imagine, to know that there's a sort of commonality of experience.
Oh, definitely. That was really the feedback that we got from the very beginning. And even from the very beginning, we revealed a lot, but we actually hadn't even hit rock bottom yet. We thought we had, but we hadn't. So stuff came out during those first, 6 months. Stuff was revealed that when we started the podcast, I didn't even know about. So we wound up having to, in real time, that I think what was so different about our podcast was in real time, we were having conversations that people have behind closed doors and you never find out about. And that was great for, 90% of people were very, very, they were so grateful and thankful that we did that. And then you have people who, if you find yourself fighting with your spouse and you put a camera up to yourself or you recorded yourself, you would probably say to, yourself later on, like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that, or I can't believe I was acting like that.
Yeah.
And so people can get very, judgmental. So it was, for the most part, really awesome, but it was also hard because, you're putting a microscope up to the way you act when you're fighting, and it's not pretty.
Right. Have there been times when you're doing it where you hit those pieces of new information or really high conflict times where you thought, I got to stop doing that. We've got to turn off the mics now. Like, this is too far for me.
We've turned off the mics before during episodes to cry or, just to recompose ourselves because there was no point in, there was nothing constructive was going to come out of the episode.
Right.
But we've always put the headphones back on, whether it's 45 minutes later or the next day or, whatever, and finished it. And if you listen to the progression of the episodes, it's very much, you can see the way our communication has changed.
Yes.
It's a complete 180.
That's what I was going to ask you, that the podcast, the sort of structure of the podcast, has that in itself been useful in healing your relationship and bringing you closer together?
100%. It saved our marriage.
Wow.
How? Like, walk us through that for people who haven't listened to the podcast.
First of all, we were married very, very young. We've been together since we were 21. We got married at 24. Always really loved each other, but there was always a lot of conflict, a lot of chaos. And we are both people who sort of thrive on chaos. We enjoy chaos in a way that is not, you probably, you need a lot of therapy for. And I think that we got lost in that chaos and we masked everything with fun. We would go out, and on the weekends and party and spend a lot of money. And we lived a very debaucherous lifestyle. And it wound up ultimately just that we were ignoring what was actually happening. So anyway, we very much were living a lifestyle that was very unhealthy. And then what happened was that once we started talking about it, like really talking about it, not just little arguments here and there, we realized that we really had never communicated before in a real way because we had just been avoiding it, going out and, just pretending that nothing was happening. So once we sat down to have these real conversations, we realized, oh my God, there is so much here to unpack that we never have. When we started doing the work, we also went to therapy individually and together, and that was huge. But the podcast really made us focus on how many couples sit down and really talk for an hour and a half every week? Not just, oh, who's driving the kids?
Right.
Right. Not just the business of running the daycare. Right.
Yeah. Where are we going for Thanksgiving? But really talk. And what we also learned is that we thought we knew each other because we knew each other when we were 21 and we were first dating and we were finding out everything about each other. But we didn't know each other now.
I have friends who got married, met when they were in college, and went to a therapist at some point and the therapist said to them, and it was so eye-opening for them, they're now in their 30s. They met in their early 20s, maybe even in their teens. And the therapist said, your problem is that you're still communicating like two 19-year-old kids. But now you're 35 years old and you have a house and you've had, this 15, 16 years of life in between then. And it hadn't really occurred to me. I got married much later, and I still think this is going to be an issue for us in 10 years, that you do kind of freeze in time with your person at that time when you meet, and your operating systems are the operating systems of very young people because that's how you've always connected. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, definitely. We didn't even realize it. And I think we both wound up feeling like, thank goodness we did this because we really liked the people we were now.
Huh. It's interesting.
Despite everything that had gone on.
We're talking to Danielle Silverstein. She's the co-host of the podcast Marriage and Martinis, and we'll be right back. For some of us, tax season is one of the only times that we look at our finances fully, and once it's over, well, that was terrible, and it is completely understandable not to want to think about it for another whole year. But using Monarch and being intentional with your finances in an ongoing way helps you see where your money is going and how you can put your refund to best use.
We are here to tell you, simplify your finances with Monarch. Monarch is the all-in-one personal finance tool designed to make your life easier. It brings your entire financial life, budgeting, accounts, and investments, net worth, and future planning together in one dashboard on your phone or laptop.
Feel aware and in control of your finances this tax season and get 50% off your Monarch subscription with code FRESH.
As you know, my husband and I are preparing to send, 3 kids off to college, and I cannot tell you how helpful Monarch has been in showing us our full financial picture, helping us to track our spending and reach important savings milestones. Our weekly meeting, Amy, it's now run by Monarch.
Love it. Achieve your financial goals for good with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes money management simple.
Use code FRESH at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off at monarch.com, code FRESH.
At DSW, we ask the important questions, like, what shoes are you going to wear? Whether you're prepping for wedding season, festival season, or just planning the ultimate vacay, the right shoes can make or break an RSVP. So own the moment. You've got big plans, and we've got just the shoes. At the perfect price, of course. Get ready to get ready with Designer Shoe Warehouse. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today and let us surprise you.
So Danielle, we have a saying on this podcast, a thing and a thing. When there's one thing wrong, there's 4 things wrong, right? It's the law of something. There's never just one problem. You have 3 things to worry about. The boiler broke and the dog's sick and, and the rent's overdue, whatever. You were just saying in your own life that was the case at this moment, this crucible of crisis in your own relationship, that there were actually several different crises going on. Tell us a little bit about the different struggles you were going through at the same time in your relationship and how they intensified one another.
We were basically going through, so many different things. I call what Adam was going through. There were just all these different branches of him that were these extensions of what he was feeling and not dealing with. And I don't want to blame him completely. Trust me, I was very much to blame too, and I realize that now. I didn't realize that 3 years ago when we started the podcast. I was very much blaming everything on him.
Fix your stuff. Yeah.
Right. You fix yourself and everything will be better. Right.
Yeah. And I think, 3 years ago, he was doing all the outward obvious things. I think that a lot of the things that I had done were much less obvious and much easier to just sweep under the rug. Whereas his were like these big, like elephants in the middle of the room. And, it was everything from he was struggling with what we call, Adam and I have referred to with our therapist as escapism, which was basically like anytime there was any instance of reality, he would just bail. It was just, he would go to Atlantic City for the weekend or, go out to dinner by himself after work and just spend 2.5 hours at a restaurant by himself. And it was just that he was not present. And when he was present, it was almost like those times that he would leave, I would breathe, a breath of fresh air because it was almost easier not to have him there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that affects everything. It affects you as a person and your confidence. It affects your kids. It affects, your ability to run a household. And so it just, everything fell apart. Everything, our relationship with each other, just everything.
And I think when you start from that place, because I really identify with this of like, we're fun. We're a couple who has fun. We're fun people. We do fun things. And sometimes we get a little edgy with it. And then I'm always amazed how little relationship there is between dating and being married to someone. Like dating is like, let's go to dinner. Let's go to the bar. Let's get bombed. Let's go to Halloween and dress in funny outfits. And being married is like, let's figure out how to deal with our kid who has a learning problem that we know nothing about and support that kid through 4th grade. And like those two things, like the person you fell in love with, who's like the funnest person at the bar, is suddenly a person you're trying to navigate this very complex situation with a child. And I think it's hard to stay on the same team because sometimes you're like, hey, fun time, Charlie over there. Like, you're now just getting in my way of solving this problem. Have you found that to be true?
Well, yeah, we struggle very much with, I think what you're referring to as like the mental load of motherhood. And yes, I would say that has been our biggest issue, has been one thing that we never talked about when we got married was I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, but we never talked about it. I never really said to Adam, like, are you cool with this? How do you think this should work? And, what should our budget be? And how are we going to, I just basically told him I want to be a stay-at-home mom. There was no communication about it. And I think that led to a lot of problems because there was this division of, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I do all the household things, and he's the worker, so he goes out and does the work and then comes home. And it really, I think it works for a lot of couples because a lot of couples, it's a mutual thing that they've decided. This was not mutual. This was something that I basically just kind of forced on him. And I think being a stay-at-home mom is absolutely wonderful. But I also think that without the communication, it becomes very hard because what are the boundaries? And, there's no clock in, clock out. And so without that communication, I think it just really becomes that you're just living these dichotomous lifestyles, of separation of like home life and work life. And we weren't meshing in the middle. There was no middle grounds, and we really have struggled a lot with that. And we've come a long way. But yeah, I think for a long time, he was not present as, but he was also working his butt off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard because I was working my butt off too. So, it's very hard. And that was one of the conversations that I knew that we really needed to have if we were going to go forward and the marriage was going to work. That was really more than anything, the biggest thing that needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting at is the same thing. It's like you spend all your time in the sphere of fun and then you get married and you kind of go into these two different spheres where it's like you do hard things and I do hard things. And occasionally we fight about what the other person is doing. It's like you left behind.
And the primary problem, like when the going gets rough, I feel like your primary thing that you're frustrated about is your partner's either disengagement with the current crisis or that they're engaged with it and doing it all wrong. And I think it's the anxiety about like, will my kid ever, meet their developmental milestones or how are we going to afford this? Whatever it is you're really worrying about, you sublimate it into like, if you weren't doing everything all wrong, it would be fine. I think it's probably natural, but I think we make things worse by turning on the other person that maybe we ran the job search wrong, as you like to say, Margaret. Like, you're looking at the wrong things when you're picking who you're going to marry. You ran the wrong job search. You're with this partner. But blaming the partner is more interesting than really addressing the fear and anxiety of what you're facing.
Well, I think part of what doing the podcast did for us was that we really, from the beginning, in a way that we weren't doing in our marriage, were really good at dividing up what we're good at and concentrating on that and appreciating each other for that and not stepping on each other's toes with that. And that wound up sort of transferring into our regular life. Like, oh, it's okay if he does it like that. That's his, he's just good at that. And my way is different, but I'm going to let him do it that way. It's working. And I think that that's, also we had gone out all these nights together, all the times we went out and had these fun nights, out to dinner and out with friends. And what I found was we had spent all these hours together. We were lucky. We got babysitters. We had parents who lived nearby. We had date nights. But we hadn't grown an ounce from any of it. So we were going out and doing the same thing over and over again at a different restaurant. That's all it was. It was the same conversation. It was the same dynamic. It was, coming home and, the same schedule. Everything was the same. And that's why we kind of put out the date night question ebook experience, was because what happened was, as we started to learn how to communicate with each other, our conversations and everything, like, it blows my mind now how we talk to each other and how we treat each other. And not to say we don't fight. We will fight until the day we are no longer on this earth, because that is just who we are as people.
Just who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's different. It feels different. The energy is different. And, and the transference of that energy is different.
That's great. We're talking to Danielle Silverstein, and we're going to come back and talk more about her book, The Date Night Questions Experience.
All my kids learned to swim when they were little. It was super important to me that they be confident and safe in the water. There was only one problem with that: taking them to swim lessons. I mean, the pools were freezing. There were always cranky adults doing laps right there. And it was definitely not, for any of us, what you would call fun.
Amy, heard. But now there's Goldfish Swim School. Goldfish takes a really thoughtful approach to swim lessons, combining research-based teaching with a warm, kid-friendly environment that actually helps kids thrive in the water.
Every detail at Goldfish is thoughtfully designed to create a golden experience, from shiver-free, warm indoor pools to comfy waiting areas for parents to professionally trained lifeguards on deck.
Goldfish uses an approach called the science of swim play, which combines guided play with proven teaching techniques to help kids learn to swim, build water safety skills, and gain confidence, all at their own pace. Lessons are designed to meet kids exactly where they're at.
If you've been thinking about swim lessons or just wondering where to start, this is a great opportunity. Right now, Goldfish Swim School is offering a waived membership plus your child's first lesson free at participating locations.
Just visit goldfishswimschool.com/free to find a location near you and enroll using promo code FREE.
That's goldfishswimschool.com/free, promo code FREE.
Amy, when I'm having a good hair day, it usually makes my whole day better. And that's why on every day, I'm taking Nutrafol.
Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, and it's the #1 hair growth supplement brand personally used by dermatologists. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements are peer-reviewed, NSF certified for sport, and clinically tested.
Nutrafol offers multiple formulas for men and women, tailored to different life stages and lifestyle factors, so you get support that's actually right for you. Adding Nutrafol to your daily routine is easy. Order online, no prescription needed, with automated deliveries and free shipping to keep you on track.
Let your hair be one less thing to worry about. See visibly thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair in 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol.
For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you visit Nutrafol.com and enter promo code LAUGHING.
That's Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code LAUGHING.
So, Danielle, I like this idea. We have talked about it on the podcast, but I think you're putting a really fine point on it, which is like this thing that we skip all the time. I have so many friends who like married like the hottest drummer in the band. And then they're like, he doesn't seem that into making lunches. I'm like, yeah, you're not knocking my socks off that he's not the best lunch maker at, 8:00 in the morning. So talk about your book, how it came about, and what is the value of having these questions that go a little deeper than, as you said, oh my God, we're having a great time.
It started because people were saying to us after, the episodes, people would say, do you have the questions you asked each other? I'd really like to ask those with my partner. And we started putting out a few here and there in emails and stuff. And I mean, it was like, people were just flocking to get them. But what we really wanted to do was break it down. What we did was we broke it down into 12 of the most popular topics we've had on podcasts, everything from, like I said, the mental load to, intimacy, to what you want for your future, just everything that we've talked about. And what we've learned to do is, number one, the ebook has for each section, it has an anecdote from Adam and me, something that we've gone through with it, which is going to be hard to top for anybody. So, so there's that breaking of the ice of, oh, okay, they really messed up. So now it's okay if we tell our version of the mess up together, because whatever we did, it's not worse than what they did. So there's that. And then there's the questions, which we really, really tried to make gentle, but yet people are having really deep conversations from them, and they're not accusatory. And all the stuff that in the moment when you decide to bring something up at the dinner table and you get flustered and it comes out wrong, that doesn't happen here, because you're asking a question that somebody else has prepared and somebody who's had these conversations has prepared. And, I'm not going to say that it might not lead to some passionate discussions. It might, certainly, if things need to be discussed in a certain way, then that might be what ends up happening. We don't give any kind of guarantee that you're not going to fight. I don't know.
I think that would be dangerous, to give any couple a guarantee that they're not going to fight.
Right.
You say in the introduction to the book that you have learned over 20 years with Adam to communicate without there being a winner or a loser in the conversation. And so these questions are, I guess, open-ended enough that there is no right or wrong answer on where we should go for Thanksgiving, because that's not what you're talking about.
Oh, definitely. And it's the reminder of, you're not team A and team B. You're team us. I know that sounds really cheesy.
Easy to forget.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you both are literally trying to make your lives better. That is ultimately the goal. You might be doing it differently. But, except in rare occasions, I think that people are just trying to, make life the best it can possibly be for their family. So, so we forget that.
Give us an example from the book of a question that sparked a really interesting conversation for you.
Well, I would say, something that really sparked an interesting conversation was we have a nostalgia and upbringing section of the book. And Adam and I were raised very, very differently. As much as we come from similar backgrounds and everything, just the way we were raised is really different. And one question that we ask in the ebook that I think is going to take us the rest of our lives to really talk about, and we've talked about it quite a bit. Sometimes, when we're talking about how we want to deal with something with the kids, a punishment, or, just anything, what is something from your childhood that you really feel like you need to unlearn?
Ooh.
Something from growing up, because that's sort of rather than being well, your parents did it this way and that's wrong. And, maybe from the sense of, wait a minute, just because they did it like this does not mean I have to. And we forget that a lot of times too. I sometimes feel like it's a competition of ooh, whose parenting are we going to use more of? My parents or your parents?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who's going to get the bigger slice of the pie when it comes to raising? Are we going to raise them religiously the way that your family did? Or are we going to raise them religiously the mine? Well, no, we should raise them religiously or, academically or socially, or whatever, the way that we want to.
And I like the framing of the question because it keeps you out of what I think often happens, which is like, your mother this, and your blah, blah this, and your crazy family that. And it takes it to like, what are we going to do? What's best for us?
Yes.
Versus like, what can I fling from like what I've observed about your life is wrong?
What's the structure around? So I'm imagining like answering this question, your partner saying something like, I guess I need to unlearn that, you know, that my dad was kind of disengaged, that I'm supposed to be disengaged. I'm supposed to be like out in the garage working on the car while, you know, the mom is doing everything. What are there sort of structures around response so that you don't seize that opportunity to be like, yes, I know. And now I'm going to explain to you why you're right and unpack all the reasons that, you know, has all the ways that it has manifested itself to my displeasure.
Yeah, I think that in the book, we try to put some strategies that we've used. And, you know, one of the biggest ones is to come from a place of empathy. That if you sort of, you know, put yourself in those shoes of, wow, what that must have been like for you growing up like that, then you're coming from a place of understanding rather than a place of, you know, how you react in the moment when someone tells you something like that. Just the way, like, I always think about the way Adam reacted in the moment when I told him I wanted to do the podcast. Had he laughed in my face and then be like, no, wait a minute. No, I didn't mean to do that. I actually think it's a good idea. Then the entire dynamic of it would be so different.
Right.
But because he reacted in that moment with like such unconditional just acceptance of what I was saying and trust, that one moment changed our whole relationship. So I think that how you react in the moment and just take a step back and be like, wait a minute, my lived experience is completely different from this other person's lived experience. I need to remember that.
I think the other thing that we talk a lot about in general, but it is very well captured in this book, is that you're having conversations outside of the time that this stuff is happening, which is a lot easier. Like in the moment where my husband has promised to do breakfast, woken up too late, everybody's screaming, like that is not the time that we're going to have a productive conversation.
Totally.
I'm going to be screaming like, you always do this. You promised you're going to do it and then you don't do a good job. And now look at it. And then the kids are like watching us fight and it's a whole thing, as opposed to Amy and I are both Catholic and we've talked on the podcast before about having to do pre-Cana, which is something that you do before you get married.
Yep.
And I went totally with the attitude of like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I can't believe we're going to church and answer questions. But I found it so we sat down and it's literally like, how did your family of origin handle money? Is that how you want to handle money? And like the ability to have, these are conversations that my husband and I would never have sat down and had together. And it's so useful.
I want to give a shout out to my parents because my parents for a long time led those like intensive weekend retreats, those pre-Canas, and they got a lot out of it, but how many couples would never say, so how are we going to handle money? They're not going to talk, what religion are we going to raise the kids? There are many people who get married without having those discussions. And once in a while, somebody would go on one of their weekend retreats and decide not to get married based on what they talked about on that weekend. And my parents saw that as unfortunately a huge win, right? Like good thing they didn't bond themselves together for life.
But we're in it. We can't really be like, you know what? I bought the book and I realized I'm out. I can't do this. But talk a little bit about that, like a non-emotional way of talking about these conversations.
Yeah. Well, there is a time for also just laughter, you know, and not having to go deep. Like there's times when you're just exhausted at the end of the week or midweek and you want to sit together, but you don't want to like, come on, I don't want to talk about, you know, why you're upset that I, you know, didn't do this or whatever. And not that the book is supposed to lead to those conversations, but sometimes it can if that's the mode of thinking that you're in. So there are places and topics in the book that are literally just fun and, you know, just to laugh together. And that's so important too. I think that's something that we forget about also, like to just have conversations that are not rooted in, I have to do this with my kids too. You know, sometimes I'm in the middle of a conversation and something will come to me like, oh, did you do that assignment? And like, if I say it, I'm screwing up the whole moment.
Yeah.
You know, and I have to like really remind myself, this is not the time for that. And, you know, so I think if you're following these questions, then you're less likely to throw in don't forget, we got to get a gift for the birthday party this weekend. Or it's just, you know, what it leads to hopefully is really just a back and forth between you two that is really just intimate because it's a conversation that is just about you. And we don't really do that usually.
It's using that muscle, right? Some of these questions are just to connect. It doesn't have to be, let's get to the bottom of what's bothering us. It's just about genuine connection.
Definitely.
Love it. Where can we find your Date Night Questions book?
I usually keep the link, first of all, in my bio of our Instagram, which is @marriageandmartinis. And you can also find it if you go to marriageandmartinis.com, and you'll see a link, or marriageandmartinis.com/DNQ. Yeah. So it's just been a really awesome adventure since we put this out, because the feedback has been amazing, and I think it's leading to stuff that is new and fresh and gives a different perspective on your relationship.
Awesome. And we will also, of course, link to it in the show notes for this episode. Danielle, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you guys so much.